If I were to ask you what is causing division and fights and quarrels and arguments right now in our day, I think I know the kinds of answers I would get. You might say race, you might say politics, you might say disagreements around the pandemic or going from everything from vaccines to masking, and you'd be right. Those are causing quarrels and disagreements. But what if there is something underlying relational breakdowns that go deeper than the issue at hand? What if there is something we bring to those issues that make us contentious? Well, James wants to kind of explore that a little bit and then go into other territory that we wouldn't necessarily relate to it, but it's just going to be a bracing kind of section of the letter that we're going to go through together. So buckle your seatbelt. So let's pick it up where we left off. James chapter 4, beginning with verse 1. What is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. You're jealous of what others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and wage war to take it from them. Now, let's stop there. James starts off, I think, in a couple of interesting ways with this subject. First, he doesn't talk about how to solve conflict. He wants to bring up what causes it. That's interesting because most of us think, well, I don't need help with that. I already know what causes conflict. Somebody did something or said something that made me mad. We don't need somebody to tell us what made us mad or fight to get into it. We know. But that's exactly his point. We don't, which is why he raises the question, what causes fights and quarrels among you? And then he answers it, which gives us a second way. This is interesting. He says we get in fights because of what's inside of us. It's not the other person. It's not what was said or done. It's usually about what is inside of us. Here's what he's saying. We are at war inwardly, so it becomes natural for us to be at war outwardly. Inner conflict leads to outer conflict. Now, we don't want to hear that because we like to think that we're always the victim in these kinds of things, and because we're a victim, however we react is justified. But James wants to challenge us. He wants us to think about the possibility that we get into most of our conflicts, most of our fights because of our own junk. So, what is our junk? James says it's about what we desire, what we want, but we don't have, what we covet and would be willing to kill for. So what's he describing? Envy. But that's just where it begins. If left unchecked, envy, the desire, turns into dislike. In fact, that's what the word envy means. It means to look on someone with malice, to have an evil eye toward someone. You just don't want what they have. You resent them for having it. It becomes personal, almost as if they are getting or experiencing what rightly belongs to you. So this isn't just about desiring something. It involves hostility toward them for having it. And then you start rooting or hoping for them to lose it and doing whatever you can to help that along. So you tear down, you attack, you undermine, you sabotage. Again, if unchecked, envy will take the dislike that it has created and lead you to destroy whatever it is you are desiring in the other person's life, which is why it's been called the rabies of the heart. It will eventually take over and make you crazy. So it is envy that often puts us into relational conflict with other people. Its weapons might be slander, lies, deceit, malice, even violence and crime. And envy will not stop until, what is desired is either possessed or destroyed. Now, why do we do that? Why do we envy? If we get into fights and quarrels because of what's going on inside us, and what's going on inside of us is envy, and envy is so destructive, it just leads to fights and quarrels, then why are we envying? Okay, James goes there next. Let's keep reading. You do not have because you do not ask God. And when you ask, you don't receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world is hatred toward God? Anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. Or do you think Scripture says without reason that the Spirit he caused to live in us envies intensely? But he gives us more grace. That is why Scripture says God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Now, that's a truckload. Why do we fight? Because we envy. Why do we envy? Because there are things we want we don't have. Why don't we have them? Is it because that person's got more talent, more money, more contacts, more luck, more breaks, more looks, more personality, more ability, more fill in the blank. That's how we tend to think. But James says we're thinking wrong. It's not because they have more. Again, it's about us. We don't have what we long for because we haven't asked God. And if we have asked God, we're not asking for the right things or with the right motives. Here's what James is after. Our fulfillment comes from God. Living in Him, relating to Him, enjoying Him, following Him, we were made for Him. Which means if we look to anything other than God to satisfy us or fill us, we'll come up empty. We're trying to be a friend of the world instead of a friend of God. Or more to the point, we're trying to draw from the world instead of draw from God. We're wanting to be in a relationship with the world instead of being in a relationship with God. We're trading what matters, what has weight, what has meaning, for something cheap and fleeting and superficial. So the ultimate breakdown, what will leave you feeling more dissatisfied than anything, is to either look to something other than God or go to God for cheap, worldly, non-spiritual things that aren't even God things. Either way, you're missing out. And then James adds one last thing. Did you catch it? God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. We can get even more out of whack on all of this when we throw pride into the mix, because what pride adds to envy is the idea that we don't even need God. When we're trying to find something to fill the emptiness inside us, in pride, we can go so far as to think that God doesn't even have anything to offer that we can't get for ourselves. We'll even think that we're self-sufficient, able to meet our own needs. We won't think we are bent and broken when we are. We won't think we are needy when we are. We won't think we need a God when we desperately do. Now, right about now, you might be wondering what we can do about all this. And that's where James takes us next, and where he shifts from this, contentious kind of warring at each other and what's going on inside of us is causing that, to a larger picture of this whole idea of a relationship with God and going to God fully and getting what God really wants to give us and what He alone can give. So let me read this. James then writes, "So let God work His will in you. Yell aloud no to the devil and watch him scamper. Say a quiet yes to God and He'll be there in no time. Quit dabbling in sin. Purify your inner life. Quit playing the field. Hit bottom and cry your eyes out. The fun and games are over. Get serious, really serious. Get down on your knees before the Master. It's the only way you'll get on your feet." Now, there's a lot packed into those 4 verses, but there's a single headline. Get back on track spiritually. Get connected with God. Turn your back on what you know isn't of Him, dishonors Him, or keeps Him out of your life. Run toward a life with Him, a life that chases Him and draws from Him and honors Him. Now, I know that kind of challenge really is meant to land into the lives of those who already consider themselves Christ followers. And I know that many of you aren't there yet. You're still exploring Christianity. You're still checking things out. So you're just going to have to eavesdrop a little bit on what James is wanting to convey to those who already believe, who already identify as being a Christian. Let me tell you who James is concerned about here. Someone who identifies as a Christ follower, but who has been living a life that is both in the world and of the world. And he says, it needs to end. We're all in the world, to be sure, but we're never, ever to be of it. You're coming to God for some things, but still chasing after the world for others. It's like you've got 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Half a heart in, half a heart out. Part of your life in, part of your life out. And the Bible has a word for it. You're lukewarm. Not hot, not cold, lukewarm. In his book, Crazy Love, Francis Chan gives a profile of the lukewarm. Let me give you his thumbnail sketch. He writes, lukewarm people don't really want to be saved from their sin. They only want to be saved from the penalty of their sin. They don't genuinely hate sin and aren't truly sorry for it. They're merely sorry because God is going to punish them. Lukewarm people don't really believe that this new life Jesus offers is better than the old sinful one. Lukewarm people are moved by stories about people who do radical things for Christ, yet they do not act. They assume such action is for extreme Christians, not average ones. Lukewarm people call radical what Jesus expected of all His followers. Lukewarm people rarely share their faith with their neighbors, co-workers, or friends. They don't want to be rejected, nor do they want to make people uncomfortable by talking about private issues like religion. Their sense of discomfort or desire for acceptance is more important than whether or not someone else goes to hell. Lukewarm people gauge their morality or goodness by comparing themselves to the secular world. They feel satisfied that while they aren't as hardcore for Jesus as so-and-so, they are nowhere near as horrible as the guy down the street. Lukewarm people say they love Jesus. And he is indeed a part of their lives, but only a part. They give him a section of their time, their money, and their thoughts. He isn't allowed to control their lives. Lukewarm people think about life on earth much more than eternity in heaven. Daily life is mostly focused on today's to-do list, this week's schedule, next month's vacation. Rarely, if ever, do they consider the life to come. When they think about the future, it isn't about heaven, but materialistic gains, real estate investments, comfortable retirements. They don't think about heaven. Lukewarm people do whatever is necessary to keep themselves from feeling too guilty. They want to do the bare minimum to be good enough without it requiring too much of them. Lukewarm people are continually concerned with playing it safe. They are slaves to the God of control. The focus on safe living keeps them from sacrificing and risking for God. Lukewarm people do not live by faith. Their lives are structured so they never have to. They don't have to trust if something unexpected happens. They have their savings account. The reality is, and this is the final line, their lives wouldn't look much different if they suddenly stopped believing in God. Well, here's the truth. We're all messed up people. We're all lukewarm in one place or another. James is wanting us to care that we are lukewarm. And if we've given our whole life over to being lukewarm, then God is useless to us, and we are useless to God. That's why Jesus said these words. He was talking about people who are lukewarm. And this was recorded in Luke's biography of his life. He said, "Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor the manure pile. It is thrown out." How would you like to hear that from Jesus? You would ruin manure. Not exactly a word of encouragement. That's how worthless being lukewarm is. I know all the things you do, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were one or the other. But since you are like lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. You say, I am rich, I have everything I want, I don't need a thing, and you don't realize that you are wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. So I advise you, buy gold from me, gold that's been purified by fire, then you'll be rich. Buy white garments from me, so you will not be shamed by your nakedness, an ointment for your eyes, so you will be able to see. The imagery here is just so precise. You are neither hot or cold. You're not on fire or dead. You're not a passionate, world-changing believer or a devout atheist. You're just kind of in the middle, safe, warm, comfortable. Jesus isn't commending being cold. He's just saying that with a cold person, at least you know where you stand relationally. I mean, they're in a camp. But this lukewarm in the middle stuff made Jesus want to vomit. That's literally what the word spit means in the original Greek language that the book of Revelation was written in, and it made him vomit. And the people who heard this knew exactly what Jesus meant. It was a phrase they used among themselves about their water supply. When it would get so bad that they would retch, Jesus is saying, that's how you make me feel when I look at you, when I drink you in. Being lukewarm is not something Christ can endure. He can't stomach it. It makes him gag. It makes him retch. They thought they had all they needed, wealth and health and clothing, and Jesus said, you're poor, you are naked, you are blind, and you don't know it. Because all you are seeing is worldly wealth, worldly clothing, worldly vision, and you fall into the trap of making spiritual things this add-on, just kind of a little add-on, just enough God to help you sleep at night, make you feel good about yourself. But you don't realize you have nothing. The wealth you think you have, the clothes you think you're wearing, the eyes by which you think you see, it's not there. None of it. You have yet to acquire true wealth, the gold that I can bring, the clothing that I can give you to wear, the blindness that I can lift from your eyes. So after saying all that, this is how he ends. Verse 20. Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him and he with me. So how does, going back to James, end this? By bringing us back full circle. He goes back to fights and quarrels, to how we should care for our inner worlds in ways that allow us to interact with others rightly. And here are the last two verses of this section. Brothers, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against his brother or judges him speaks against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you're not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. There's only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor? To judge someone is to make assumptions about their character, to assume something that you really don't know. When you judge someone, you suspect the worst, and then you act on that suspicion. You speak evil about them or against them. You get them, you put them down rather than build them up. You undermine them. James is saying, ease up. Quit being so hard on people. Who are you to judge anyone? Indeed, worry about yourself. There's only one judge. You're not him. Quit acting like it. Deal with your own lukewarmness. James gives us a bracing slap in the face in the midst of our everyday life about what matters and how we should be living. And when it comes to Jesus, there's only one way, all in. And any other way of living is an illusion, a dream divorced from reality. You know, that kind of wake-up call, that kind of insertion of reality into fantasy reminded me of something that happened on Friday, November 22nd, 1963. The British playwright David Lodge was watching a local performance of one of his own satirical, humorous plays. And there was one scene where an actor in the play showed up for a job interview and was carrying a portable radio. He set the radio down and let live music play in the background while the play went on. It was just, so on any given night with this play, they didn't know what was ever going to come on the radio. But one of the, side parts of this was it was real live radio music. And so the dynamic to the play that changed from night to night. Well, on that particular night, the actor walked out with the radio, turned it on as planned, and proceeded with that part of the play. But within a few moments, the music suddenly ended. And a voice came over the radio with a news bulletin. And it said, "We interrupt this program to inform you that today, the American president, John F. Kennedy, was assassinated in Dallas, Texas." The audience gasped. The actor just completely lost track of where he was in the play and just off script, just walked over in stunned silence and just turned the radio off. But it was too late. In one sentence, the reality of the outside world entered the artificial world of the theater. Suddenly, whatever action took place on stage seemed superficial and irrelevant. That's what James wants to do to us. It's what James should do to us. Your life is going merrily along, and suddenly there's a break in the news. A president was assassinated. A jet flew in to one of the Twin Towers. Your child is very, very sick. There's a break in the news. But what's the biggest break in the news there could ever possibly be in your life or mine? Here it is. This isn't a game. Heaven and hell are real. Jesus is not a joke. And being lukewarm is spiritual suicide. You're making Jesus wretch. Your life isn't good enough for a dunghill. In the scope of eternity, your life on planet Earth won't add up to a nanosecond, but how you live that nanosecond is everything. So live it in light of the eternity to come. Live it in light of the 100% certainty of your eventual death. Live it knowing that what the world values, God doesn't, and neither should you. They're just shadows. Don't build your life around this life. Build your life around the life to come. James is the radio saying, we interrupt your life to inform you that today the God of the universe is very alive and well and knows your name and is watching how you play out your life and waiting to see if you'll quit being lukewarm and finally open the door for Jesus to come in.